According to a study done by Northwestern Mutual, Americans need 1.46 million to retire. Now, I personally think that number is completely ridiculous. 4% of Americans retire with over $1 million invested, and 2% of Americans retire with over $2 million invested, which means that roughly 3% of Americans actually make it to that $1.46 million number. And so saying that that's what the average American needs really just fuels the narrative that makes people feel behind. And so in this video, I wanted to break down how much that you should expect to retire with based on the income that you make. And as an example, I'll use 4 different salaries. Now, before we get into the numbers, I want to just walk you through why $1.46 million is actually based on some assumptions that might not apply to you. Because the reality is if you just accept this at face value, you might end up chasing a number that you don't actually need, or you'll just get discouraged and never bother actually saving and investing for your future. And so really there are 3 main problems with that $1.46 million number. The first one is that it just simply ignores Social Security. The average Social Security payment right now is $1,900 a month. That's $23,000 per year that $1.46 million doesn't even account for. And for most people, that's going to be a significant chunk of what they really need. Now, the second thing that it does is it completely ignores your tax situation. If your retirement savings are in a Roth IRA, which hopefully they are, then the money that you're withdrawing out of your retirement account is available to you tax-free. So $1 million in a Roth account is very different than $1 million in a traditional IRA or a 401k. In fact, it's not even close. And the third thing that number does is it actually ignores the reality of what your spending will look like during retirement. Right now, if you're earning the average salary of $60,000 a year, you're hopefully saving 15% of that salary. Otherwise, you might end up with nothing at retirement. But on top of that, you also pay taxes on the salary that you're making today. So really, you're not living off of $60,000 a year, and you would need to replace a smaller amount of income. If we just simply remove the 15% that hopefully you're investing, that drops your salary down to $51,000 per year. And let's say that you spend 10% on taxes. Now that drops down your salary to $46,000. So the question shouldn't be, am I going to get to 1.46 million or am I on track to hit 1.46 million? The question should actually be, what amount of money do I personally need based on my spending? Now, the first thing that you need to figure out is what your replacement income would be. Remember, the goal during retirement isn't just to replicate your salary. It's really to cover what you're actually spending. Most financial planners will say that you will spend 80 to 85% of your salary during retirement. And I think that's a great starting point, but I also think that that's too simple. And that's because 2 of your biggest expenses disappear immediately when you retire. The first one, as we talked about, is your investing. You should assume that that's no longer happening when you do retire. And then the second part is simply taxes. Now, look, there are people that pay income taxes during retirement, but ideally you are either converting money from a traditional IRA or a 401k to a Roth, or you are just investing in a Roth from the get-go. Either way, your tax burden is going to drop significantly during retirement. And then basically you can assume that what's left over is what you would actually be spending during retirement. That's the number that we're going to focus on trying to replace. Now, for reference, the average retiree spends about $5,100 per month right now. And this isn't for individual retirees, this is based on households. And the median household income right now is $80,000 a year. And so as you can see, the average retiree is spending less than what the average income actually is. Once you have your target income, we can use that to figure out what your portfolio number needs to be. Now, another thing that 1.46 million is predicated on is a 4% safe withdrawal rate. That's basically the idea that you can withdraw 4% from your portfolio every single year without running out of money. But more recent research actually puts it at 4.7%. And that simply means that you can actually withdraw a little bit more than what people originally thought. Let's say that you retire with $1 million. Previously, using the 4% safe withdrawal rate, you would have been able to withdraw $40,000 per year. Now, using the 4.7%, that actually bumps this up to $47,000 per year, a $7,000 per year difference. But that 4% actually makes it really easy to figure out what your retirement number needs to be. You simply take your target annual spending, you subtract what you estimate that you would be getting from Social Security. If you have no idea, you can just use the average, which is $23,000 per year. Then you divide that by 4.7% or by 0.047, and that's your number. That's really all that it takes to figure out what your actual retirement number is. Well, let's go ahead and run that for the 4 salaries that we had talked about in the beginning of the video. For each one, I'm gonna remove the 15% for investing, and then I'm gonna remove an estimated amount of taxes that you would be spending on that income level, which means that what's left is gonna be the actual spending target. And then I'll show the portfolio that you'll need with and without Social Security in case you're someone that does believe that Social Security is gonna magically go away. Now, going through this table, you'll notice that if you factor in Social Security, there's only one income level that I mentioned where you actually would need over 1.46 million. And that's for folks that are making over $200,000 per year, which, by the way, most of the population is not making over $200,000 a year. The number that's closest to what the median salary today is that $75,000 number to that $120,000 number. I really think for most families, those are probably the target range that you're gonna wanna aim for at retirement. But again, if we factor in Social Security, both numbers are well below that $1.46 million number. In fact, the $75,000 number is still well below 1.46 million, even when you factor not having Social Security. Okay, so now that you have your target number, I wanna just be honest about something. That number is actually less important than you think. What's more important are the things that determine whether or not you get to that number in the first place. That's your savings rate, the accounts that you're using, and time. That's it. If you're consistently investing 15% or more, you're likely on track to retire with enough money. And that's regardless of whatever salary bracket that you're in. The math works the same at 40,000 as it does at 200,000. And that's why so many financial advisors often say that you can't out-earn a spending problem, and it's more important what you keep than what you earn. But additionally, you want to make sure that you're using the right tax-advantaged accounts. The Roth IRA is the greatest investment tool that you have access to, and if you simply just max that out over the course of 30 years, you're gonna have plenty of money during retirement. And you won't have to worry about paying any taxes on the withdrawals that you make during retirement, which is really impactful for your Medicare premiums, as well as how much taxes that you pay on the Social Security income that you're bringing in. But for some people, you're gonna have to invest more than what's allowed to be contributed to a Roth IRA. And for those people, I highly recommend having an HSA or a health savings account. This account will help you cover all of your medical expenses during retirement, which is really important to know because the average retiree is going to spend about $172,000 on healthcare during retirement. And so an HSA is actually the only triple tax advantage account where you can deduct the money that you contribute from your taxable income. The money that grows in there grows tax-free, and when you go to use it to pay for your healthcare, you don't have to pay taxes on that either. If you took anything from this video, it's simply this. Don't measure yourself against some number from some study. Instead, figure out the number that is applicable to your life, your income, and your scenario. And then build a savings rate that actually gets you there.